Good afternoon. My name is Meera Viswanathan, and I'm the head of the Ethel Walker School. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our program today, Disrupting Gendered Mindsets, the Walker's Capabilities Approach program. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to begin with something of a personal anecdote. Some 60 years ago, when I was a new immigrant to this country, at the age of 6, my sister and I received Barbie dolls, and we were utterly fascinated. We had never seen such dolls, nor the wonderful outfits and paraphernalia that came with each outfit, indicating what that doll was going to do or be. And so we collected costumes: Barbie the astronaut, Barbie the doctor, Barbie the skier, Barbie the opera singer. And of course, it's customary when you play dolls to make up a name for your doll and to make up a character. And so my sister began, and she said, well, my doll's name is so-and-so, and she is an X, and she likes to do Y. And I listened to my sister and I said, well, my doll is an opera singer who is a skier who's going to fly to the moon and also spends her time playing tennis on the weekend, and sometimes she also likes to dance. And I remember my sister saying to me, no, you have to pick one thing, and that's what you have to do. And I said, but my doll likes to do all these things, and she's good at them. Why can't she do them? And my sister said, you cannot be an astronaut and a doctor and a skier and an opera singer. And I remember being really annoyed with that, thinking, why can't girls do all the things they want to do? And I think it's from the memory of that seminal experience that I began to think about what I could do with my life. And then as I became an educator, thinking what girls could do with their lives. Like many girls, until the age of 12, I was loud and funny, garrulous, and then, of course, I learned that that's not what girls get complimented for. And so at the age of about 12 or 13, I shut down. The mind continued to work, but the voice died away. And it took me some decades, literally 40 years, to recover what I think of as my true full voice. And as I taught my classes in various places in the world and at various institutions, I began to think about what a world might look like if girls' voices didn't get shut down. And I had the singular experience, first, of teaching at a wonderful higher education institution for 35 years at Brown University. And it gave me a chance to observe my students, and they were marvelous. But I realized with uncanny precision that I could tell in the first week of classes which of my students had gone to a co-ed school and which of my female students had gone to an all-girls school. And it had to do with their demeanor, their comfort in their skin, their ability to persist in argument, and their lack of apologies when they spoke. And this began to make me think about, these girls didn't lose their voices, evidently. And what is it that happens at an all-girls school? And as I watched this over the years, I began to be intrigued by the idea of how could you create an environment that was deliberately, intentionally suited for the development of girls. And so that brought me to the Ethel Walker School. And in the meantime, I'd also begun thinking about education, about aspiration, and about social justice. And when we think about gender justice, when we think about racial justice, when we think about justice in terms of places of national origin, we come back to the same specific points. We come back to the issue of the freedom to be and to do, the freedom to have agency in your life. And this, I discovered, is precisely what the philosopher-economist Dr. Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate, talked about in his writings on the capabilities approach, which is how do we help one another to become the fullest being that we can be? How do we realize the full potential of beings and doings that justice is not about material things or about everybody having the same thing, but rather to think the way Dr. Sen thinks about individuals being able to realize their fullest potential and possibility. And while this has been adopted by the United Nations in terms of the Human Development Group, it struck me that we could use this in education with girls as well. And so 5 years ago, we began talking about the capabilities approach and what it means. And what are the fundamental elements of it at Walker's? Well, it has to do with the understanding of the most inclusive possibility. And so I think of Walker's not as an all-girls school, but as a girls plus school. Because even the very notion of all girls is still mired in that old binary, as if that there's a wall and there are only two kinds of beings in the world, males and females. And I think what most of us understand now is a spectrum of possibilities. And while there may be greater sort of barbell-like emphasis on either side of the spectrum, in fact, it's specious to think of it simply as a polarity. And so at Walker's, we think of it in terms of girls plus, both because of the potentiality, but also because of the fact that we have students and adults on our campus who identify as non-binary or non-gender conforming, and a host of other different ways to represent themselves. So when we think of girls, we are thinking of it in sort of broad strokes. And one of the things we've thought about is how differently girls and boys, and when I say girls and boys, I say that not as a binary, but as general patterns of development across the spectrum, are different. And it came to me that most of the education we think of as coeducational is in fact rooted in male patterns of development. And by that I mean, take a look at most secondary schools. If you talk to most independent schools, especially boarding schools, the most common word you'll hear on campus typically is pace. Pace, pace, pace. We've got to get this done, we've got this schedule, we've got to go to this and that, leaving not a jot of time for reflection or pausing. And the theory being that when many of these independent boarding schools were all male, that there would be transgressive activity if there was any kind of hiatus. And so the idea was fill up every bit of time, and that way no one will have time to get into trouble, and we can face the next day and fill that one up too. It's a pity that we follow this model when it comes to girls' education. If we think about education, learning is nothing more than the most sophisticated form of play that human beings can know. This is what Johann Huizinga, in his well-known book, Homo Ludens, Playing Man, argues. If we can think of education as this kind of play, as this arena of possibility, of that delight, of this sense of struggle and then achievement of goals, of learning, then suddenly everything changes. And so what the capabilities approach is about justice, but it's also about play. It's about creativity, it's about the act of doing and creating, and about possibilities. And so at Walker's, we have assembled a program. It is not just a program about skills. And while there's a constellation of capabilities, and others will talk about what those are, really what we are doing here is offering the possibility for girls to understand a potential that they might not know exists. The beauty part is that it's not about certain girls who are self-selected or the brightest girls. What we know is that all of us are capable of education. Another feature I would argue of girls' education is it's not about zero-sum games. And zero-sum games, of course, are ones in which one person wins for another person to lose. And that's why the whole system of grading and the bell curve is a little puzzling, because when we learn something, somebody doesn't have to be unlearning something or be ignorant. In fact, it's just the opposite. more often than not, we learn in partners and pairs and groups. And so learning doesn't require that somebody else have a negative outcome for us to learn. And I think girls' education recognizes this. So at Walker's, the capabilities approach is about all girls. It's about the fact that girls can achieve a level of competence in a number of areas that serve as a kind of toolbox, and a necessary toolbox, life hacks, we might even want to think of them, in terms of their being able to achieve greater things, both now and in the years ahead. The second part, in addition to these capabilities, which really are about disrupting gendered patterns of thought. So for example, one of our capabilities is around finance, and girls being able to, for example, become legal tax preparers, certified by the IRS at the age of 16. And we have a school full of them. It's also about their learning to invest money, having understood how money operates, how equities operate, and discovering that they're pretty good at these things. All of our girls are learning these things. And these are areas in which girls are not always encouraged to pursue, or perhaps themselves think, this isn't really for me. What we want is to open all of the doors and have as many possibilities for girls to elect what they ultimately will choose to do. The other part of the capabilities approach is about the how-ness of it, which is most problems these days are too complex for an individual to resolve. And I think back to that seminal Harvard Business Review article in 2011, in which two researchers studied different groups to understand what helped one group to outsolve another group, recognizing that going forward in the world, we will all need to collaborate in order to solve those extraordinary challenges ahead of us. What they discovered was that the one element that consistently appeared that elevated one group above another in terms of problem solving was the presence of one or more women. And so it seems to me that something is interesting about women, leadership, and problem solving, in which collaboration, the idea that together we can achieve better outcomes that any one of us could have achieved individually, no matter how clever we are. And so what we're interested in the capabilities approach program here in doing is to have girls collaborate. As we say, they bolster one another. They both support one another, but they also challenge. They're that firm support that forces us to sit upright, to move forward. And that's what the girls do here. Like the Marines, there is no girl left behind. And so at Walker's, the capabilities approach is about the ability of girls to achieve and the recognition that academic excellence and aspiration are not only not antithetical to social justice, they are in fact synonymous. Thank you.
We are the minority in almost everything. We're the minority in the country, and we're definitely the minority in the medical field. Like, it's very white male dominated, which is why I was so interested in it. Also, because I want, to be involved. I want to be a doctor of some sort. I want my PhD. It was very important for me to understand and kind of almost prepare myself for the things that I have to deal with in the future.
When I think about bolstering, I think about my friends supporting me and helping me to grow as a person. It's very difficult to put it into words, but it's just like this feeling you have where you know you're being supported all the time, and with that real, genuine support, you feel like you can do better. You become a lot more confident in yourself, and with that comes maturity and growth. And now here I am.
The origins of the capabilities program was an idea of our head of school, and she decided that it was a great idea to have this new program for thinking of ways to disrupt gendered mindsets. And the idea behind it was to create a program where our girls would learn all of these skills that weren't traditionally taught in high schools that would equip them to be able to go out into the world and be more prepared in ways that is not typical for a high school student. Early on, we connected with the Edward E. Ford Foundation, and they invited us to apply for an educational leadership grant, which was a two-part process that we engaged in. We made it through the first round, and we had a great group of faculty, administrators, and staff who really sat down and brainstormed what the Capabilities Approach program should look like.
One of the most amazing things about the Capabilities Approach program for Ethel Walker is the way in which it has been born out of the Walker's DNA. And we found three important ingredients in our ability and desire to develop our program. First was the realization that this approach to education was a part of the school since its beginning. Later in her life, our founder, Ethel Walker, reflected on her motivation for starting the school and noted that there were three things that were important to her. One, she wanted to create something. Second, she wanted to take a chance. She wanted to try something new. And third, she wanted to learn by doing. These three things, creating, taking chances, and learning by doing, are basically a minimalist interpretation of the Capabilities Approach. Her educational philosophy that she began back in 1911 was essentially what we are updating 110 years later. The second ingredient, and this one was truly a sign, is that we discovered that one of our alums, Sarah Menard, who is part of our Capabilities Approach team, worked with Dr. Amartya Sen as a student and wrote her PhD dissertation under him. Her breadth and depth of knowledge have helped form our theoretical foundation and has allowed this program to flourish. And finally, what has made all the difference is a group of faculty members like Chris Semk, who embraced the concept both philosophically and pedagogically and came together to form the Capabilities Approach architects. They not only did further research into the theory, but also guided the programmatic implementation that now is in the program. We could not have done it without them.
I'm not sure if I want to major in programming, but I would say that you definitely learn a lot of important skills that are necessary for our daily lives. And it also, like in general, the idea of being able to create something, I don't know, just like gives the inspiration to do something more.
So although Amartya Sen's work was really targeted towards the issues in low-income countries, and deprivation, of course, has varying degrees, income, environment, political well-being, I would say that the Capabilities Approach is clearly a universal set of principles that are ultimately a moral philosophy of how people should be treated. But in an all-girls setting particularly, it's incredibly powerful because it taps into some of the fundamental human components of education that sometimes gets forgotten in a very gendered world where men and women are given specific opportunities, sometimes unconsciously, where a lot of bias is implicit. And so by being explicit about the entitlements and the freedoms that are inherent in Capabilities Approach for women and girls, you're elevating some of those key principles that Amartya Sen dedicated his life to in a curriculum and infusing it into lived experiences and skills that girls can then articulate for themselves as they grow up into the world. And so they're expressing themselves as full human beings, as women, and without apology, and without also trying to fit into any cultural norms. They're actually redefining the cultural norms based on some very beautiful and fundamental human truths.
One of my interests in the Capabilities program to begin with was philosophical. I was especially interested in the idea of eudaimonia, or flourishing. And in particular, what that looks like and what that means. And so what I thought was so interesting is for Aristotle, eudaimonia or flourishing isn't a matter of what one has or what one is, but rather what one does, and then what one can become. And so that's what I thought was a really transformational piece of this approach. And this is the ethos that undergirds, for example, our first aid CPR program, which is as much about cultivating concern for the well-being of others as it is about acquiring a particular skill. The VITA program likewise enables girls to witness the effects of social, economic, and gender inequality on families, as well as assist those families in maximizing their tax returns. Similarly, rhetorical fluency aims not simply to deliver a polished speech, but also to discover one's own voice and the capacity to know when and how to use it effectively in the public sphere. So at the end of the day, the capabilities approach is not just about acquiring a useful or marketable skill, but rather about being able to choose freely to use one's resources or not according to one's own system of values.
It feels a little rough. It takes a while to get used to the idea that you're not always going to get it right the first time, and you're probably not, but I think it's been really good for me in particular, someone that's always been very quick at doing things, to be able to step back and say, okay, I need to reread this entire page of code to find this one semicolon that I forgot to put in. And it's been very beneficial, and I think it's going to help me a lot in other areas of my life, especially math, where I tend to go really quickly through, and it's been helping me kind of step back and be able to examine the bigger picture.
We created a faculty task force whose charge it was to look at the ways that the capabilities approach might be fully integrated into the life of the school across academics, co-curriculars, the seminar program. Faculty input was and remains a crucial component of this program. And one point emerged from our discussions, that is that the capabilities approach could not simply be something that was tacked on or add on to the existing schedule, but had to be folded in to the existing life of the school, that it was to be transformational.
Our 10 capabilities, or this constellation of skills, is divided into 4 areas. The agencies are about one's physical relationship to the world, about health and survival and helping others to survive. Fluencies are about engagement and negotiation with the world, especially in those areas where girls and women have historically been underrepresented or talked over or disenfranchised. The discoveries are about her experiential relationship to the world, about sustaining the earth but also sustaining herself, about self-worth and being a stranger in a strange land to increase empathy and understanding internationally and interpersonally. And finally, the self-selected capability allows a student to develop a skill or to learn to do something that she has always wanted to learn, instead of what the school says you must learn.
The seminar program for grades 9 through 12 operates on a trimester schedule. It has become an incubator for many of the capabilities, with grade-level seminars devoted to first aid and CPR certification, coding, digital citizenship, tax preparation, and the self-selected capability. So other capabilities enhance the existing academic program much more broadly. Rhetorical fluency, which is interdisciplinary in nature, will be embedded across the curriculum with the development of common expectations and criteria for evaluating the functional mastery in every grade level and in every discipline. A corresponding senior seminar will serve as a kind of rhetorical capstone, preparing each student for her senior speech, which is addressed to the entire school. Finally, the winter intersession program, known as Lacuna, offers students the chance to identify and explore their own interests, that is the self-select capability, with the intention of teaching it to others.
Particularly for girls to be financially literate when they start young, such as us as high schoolers. In such a male-dominated field of finances, math, and other things like that, it's really important that we learn here and in all girls space the tools and the terms and how to do taxes, because that'll make us that much more prepared for our future.
The constellation of skills of the Capabilities Approach program is introduced to our students in 2 ways. First, every student participates in our Capabilities Seminar program, which is built into our academic day. In these seminars, students are introduced to capabilities, they practice them, and they achieve functional mastery of each. Secondly, we've integrated the Capabilities Approach directly into classrooms. Classroom integration includes making sure every discipline in every grade level is using common standards for public speaking and presentation, making sure students' voices and agency are being nurtured and considered, allowing for and pointing to successful women as role models, encouraging grading for equity practices, which support and live out the capabilities approach through standards-based expectations, assuring social and academic scaffolding is in place for every student, being attentive to the social-emotional life of students and adults for that matter, and promoting justice in all we do.
The capabilities approach spoke to me as a language teacher with the idea of proficiency and fluency over perfectionism. And it actually kind of helped to encourage me to move my entire department in that direction, because what we were doing in the classroom and made sense in language pedagogy also made sense with respect to the capabilities approach. So that gave us new language to use to talk about proficiency, and also an impetus to really further that in our classes.
The confidence that I gained in the pool really allowed me to be more confident in my classes. If I got a bad grade or grade that I didn't want, then I would keep going and make sure that I did better next time and not give up. And also just being able to keep working harder in classes and make sure that even if I had a bad class, that I wouldn't give up and I would keep going like I did with swimming.
As teachers, we talk a lot about the importance of content and skills regardless of our discipline with what we're teaching. To me, when I think about what I believe in the importance of education, content is certainly extremely important. Knowledge is power. That can go a long way. Skills are also extremely important. Knowing how to do things can take us many, many steps, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Yet for me, the true power of learning and education is doing something with what you know and what you know how to do. That's the real power, that's the capabilities component of this. It's a little bit more nebulous into thinking what exactly that could look like, because truly the possibilities are endless. So that's something we really try to do here at Walker's, is to create those opportunities for students to extend that learning, what they know how to do outside of the classroom to really make a difference and be the change that they want to see.
Each week we had a specific lesson and a topic, and we were given step-by-step instructions into how we should formulate answers. An example would be a business model canvas, which basically would say what we're doing, our target audience, our budget, things we would need. So it's just all the information, and they would help walk us through all of that. But I didn't realize how easy it was to put something like that together, and it just made me more confident in my ideas and the potential for the things that I'm interested to turn into something actually impactful to the environment around me. And at the end, we actually did a little presentation, and we had a little bit of help rehearsing that and preparing that with our peers and with our coach. And at the end, we talked about just what we loved, and we got a lot of feedback. So it definitely did make me more confident and more eager to express my ideas, because they were just so warmly encouraged and embraced.
Thank you all for joining us today. I began this program by mentioning a childhood story of Barbie dolls and possibilities. And as I think about our girls and their possibilities, I realize they will be opera singers who are skiers and scientists, and they will do many things in the course of their lives. But here's the most important outcome of the capabilities approach. It's first and foremost the belief in possibility, in continuing to learn, to grow, to realize that learning is a struggle, but it's a playful struggle. It's one that they are not daunted by. And that the girls who go through the Capabilities Approach program achieve that level of confidence and comfort in themselves. They can learn pretty much anything they want to learn. The second part of the Capabilities Approach program is the recognition that those to whom much is given, much is also expected, and that there's responsibility in having these, as we term them among the girls, superpowers. And so there's not just an obligation, but a willing impulse in all of our girls to somehow use those skills, those capabilities, to shed light on important issues in the world, to try to resolve them, to partner with others to find solutions. And so what we see in our girls is both that desire to learn, that sense of wonder at the world, but fundamentally a recognition that they are part of the betterment of that world. And that is the reason, the purpose, the telos for our being here together. And so it gives me great pride to watch them develop. And I only hope that I can see some of the wondrous changes that they will effect in the world.